And I can also see the online notifications, so I will not ignore you. I'm waiting for a response from the online friends, if you can tell me if you have audio. Cool, it's working, awesome. So we were gonna be in one documentation part thing, this whole presentation. This was originally designed to be in a 3-hour workshop at DjangoCon US. So you have tons of resources. You also know me now. So if you ever have any questions, comments, or concerns about, keep them nice and civil, please, about Microsoft and Python or VS Code and Python, I know the people who care very, very much about it. I too care very much about it. And I'm happy to try to help you get answers on any of the things that you want. So my name's Dawn Wages. I'm the Python community advocate here at Microsoft. Not here, over there. I am here. Over here, I'm actually on my free time and I'm just doing this for fun. So that shows you how much I actually really enjoy VS Code. This part, I'm not actually being paid for. I also, and because they're not paying me, I also have an agency, command lines. I started with some friends, Chuk and Marietta. Some people know them in the room. And if you also have Python needs and you just don't want some cool people to work on some Python code for you, we've been doing that. We have our first client this summer, so you could be our second. Anyway, so let's jump into the tutorial. Anybody want this up for a little longer? There is some interactive portions of it. I will be asking for like voting and things like that. And there's a Slido that you'll see like you're voting live. So if you could get on there, you can vote live and we can see it. Okay. All right, so the premise of this whole talk is really we're going to start out with the functionality of VS Code. We're going to get into it. There's one of the tricky parts about VS Code is that it's an extensible editor. It is free as well. So one of the reasons why we've had an explosion of popularity is because we also invest so much time in the developer experience, but it's also, there's a lot of fiddly bits. So people don't understand or don't think it's intuitive, rightfully so, to know what to do with your VS Code out of the box to suit your skill sets. I have a couple other talks that are a little bit more poetic, a la Daniele, but I will never reach that level of poetry, that more so talk wax poetic about investing in your developer experience, making yourself feel at home, getting nestled in, and then figuring out all of the bits and bobs that make you really feel happy and healthy and productive. And I really think that is part of the flavor of what you can get to do with VS Code. So if you take the time to be intentional with it and learn all of the ins and outs, you may find a really cool developer experience that helps you and does not prevent you from using Emacs or Vim if you want to. You argue amongst yourselves which one's the best. Okay. So VS Code, as I mentioned, it is the code editor. It also is what powers dev containers and code spaces. Can I get a raise of hands? Who here uses VS Code actively right now? Okay. And everyone who raised their hand, because it was like a lot of people, but everyone who didn't raise their hand, if you're not using VS Code actively, is someone on your team using VS Code or someone close to you using VS Code, and that's why you're curious? Okay, cool. I'm just trying to get a sense of who I'm trying to win over. I also like PyCharm. I was a PyCharm user as well, and dev containers and code spaces are also just extensible tools that you can use on other editors as well. So I'm not trying to push you to use anything that you don't want to use, but it is heavily VS Code focused. So if you're not interested in VS Code, this may not be the best session for you. So as I mentioned, it is a 50-minute workshop. I hopefully will not go 5 minutes over. And there's a 3-hour kind of guideline on there too. We'll start with what's VS Code and what is dev containers and how to get into code spaces. Can I get a raise of hands on who knows what dev containers are? Cool. And then what about a show of hands of who knows or uses code spaces? Okay, cool. So I've got some educating to do. That's awesome. So VS Code is inside dev containers and code spaces, and it's just a way for you to travel anywhere with your code. Dev containers is under the hood a lot of Docker. So all of your information that you've used with Docker virtual environments containers is transferable, but it also gives you an ability to set your environment declaratively and also have your editor in it. So it is a dev container. You are going to have two parallel containers, one for your production, one for your development life and testing lifecycle. You are going to share dependencies across your development lifecycle through that container. And then hypothetically, I typically don't do this because it ends up getting messy, but hypothetically, you can copy some of the base container image for your local development and then do a production on the same image. I use GitHub Actions. It doesn't actually work apples to apples. I'm pointing it to the same bullseye image, but it's not always the same. Okay, so that's theoretically. So then we'll also get into the VS Code guide. I get into the nitty gritty and I talk about AI and Copilot. There's a portable mode, there's a Zen mode, there's a screencast mode. We can dive deep into AI if people are interested, but if this is not an AI interested audience, it doesn't have to be. No one's paying me to do. We have an opportunity for group exploration. And so I have some scenarios that you can pick some of. And then if we want to, we can take a vote, or I can just keep going into it and we can pick items we want to talk about. But you have the opportunity to just explore on your own. And then we can come back and talk about the things that we've explored, and I can give context, or we can answer questions, or I can take public complaints. I have broad shoulders and it's totally fine. And then we'll talk about dev containers and code spaces. And then the last part is on your own. Code spaces will mostly be on your own. All right, so let's jump in. So this workshop can be self-directed as well, so you can have this and I will continually update it. But I would love to know if you have feelings on your development environment. Take out VS Code, take out any of the technology tools that I've talked about. You just have words and feelings on your development environment. Can you share them? I want to get vibes of the audience. How do you feel? Is it like hairy? Yeah, we can say them out loud.
So I use PyCharm.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I've set up my shortcuts for opening the terminal and various Windows spaces and stuff.
What's your shortcut? I'm actually curious. Which one do you use? Command 2. Okay.
Yeah. And so it has a lot of shortcuts.
Yep.
Of course, it does VS Code. I use it sometimes when I'm doing complicated stuff.
Yep. All right. Well, I will try to win you over, and everybody else can make their own decision. But I got you. All right. Okay. Any other thoughts? You can just say it out loud too. But I would love to have the word cloud if we have some. Let's say competitive. Is this working? Why did it do that? Okay. All right. Competitive. This is also the first time I've done hopefully welcoming. I love that. Any more? Some people can say them out loud. Tedious, maybe? Confusing? Okay. I'll win people over. Okay, cool. So if you have any questions as we go through this, you can also put some questions in the Q&A, and I will be revisiting this afterwards, not this week. Also, if you have feedback, yes. Yeah, you can write right here. Yeah. So this one is the second tab for polls. You can just write your vibes. All right, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we only have 15 minutes, but so it's free. It's built on open source. It's built off of the Pyrite, and then it also has some extra goodness on top. Some of people's concerns about VS Code is they don't want people watching them. You can turn off the telemetry, and so there is this. I think it's VS Codium is a fork of VS Code. Use it if you'd like, but you're also missing out on some of the newer features that come every day. So there's VS Code stable, and then there's also insiders. So insiders have nightly releases. Think about it as we have the Windows Insiders program, but think about it as people who are on the bleeding edge and who are kind of testing, and those are our most avid users. But we also have monthly stable releases. We have a release coming out and release notes coming out the end of this week, and we have May release as well. You can have them living on your computer side by side. One has a green icon, one has a blue. Also, we have Python in the browser. And so people might think, oh, yeah, it's just an editor in the browser. But for those who may know, like the stack that it takes to put Python in the browser, it's a big deal. Some of our team members have invested heavily in figuring out how to make sure WebAssembly and Python in the browser works. So it starts in the browser, it does all of the work in the browser, and then it outputs in your terminal. And that's pretty cool. And we are adding to giving back to the ecosystem. So some people may know Brett Cannon, who is a C Python core contributor, and also Eric Snow. Both of those people work at Microsoft and are heavily involved in it, and they get some of their time paid for to contribute to C Python. But we also actually have a team called the Faster C Python team, and they 5 people whose 100% of their time is devoted to making Python faster. They also collaborate with Facebook and other teams. It is not a secret cabal by any means. They're just like nerds and very quiet about it, but we're trying to get them a little bit more noisy to share the work that they do because they're very proud of it. I also have release videos and streams every second Friday of the month. It will not be because I will be here, but it'll be the third Friday this month. It's called the Python Pulse. And that's one of our friends, Marlene. She works at Microsoft now too, and I have an episode with LangChain about LangChain with Marlene. So we don't have to keep doing the interactive part. It was really just to be fun. We can, but I wanted to know, what are you most interested in learning about today? Since people are just like these, that's also fine. General VS Code settings. I also see that we're like winning people over. What about VS Code collaborative features? Our last talk with Tobias and Kenya was talking about collaborative programming. There is LiveShare. There's also GitHub Copilot, which is a AI pair programmer. There is a video in here that I did a deep dive. I also broke a little rule and I published a video that's not live yet on my personal channel, so you all can get it today. So if you want to see me build an entire Django app in 45 minutes with GitHub Copilot, it absolutely underscores the things that Kenya mentioned, where if you are not experienced with programming, I've been a Django engineer for about 8 years, prompt is going to be very hard. And so you're not going to have all of that context or be able to tell whether or not it's really good code. But Django is really good, especially from getting from 0 to maybe like 60, because you do have the ability to have the error messages that Django provides. Django is really good at kind of telling you like something's broken and where to look to fix it. So I'm going to say I'm interested in doing these settings, and that's my top priority. And then I also want to collaborate. Cool. Seems like other people are agreeing with me. That's some things that we're looking to get into. It also seems like some people are interested in GitHub Copilot, but we're going to spend less time on that, and so I'll let you all just do that on your own. Cool. Dev containers. So yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I would love to connect with you and keep that on something that we can tackle, and anyone else interested in doing that. So there is a episode of the Python Pulse where I interview our senior engineer tech lead for VS Code and Python extension team. And for those who don't know, most of the functionality always lives in an extension. This is something that's part of the talk, but like I'll just talk to you about it. And so they all live in extensions. That's just a design decision that we've done. So there are extensions that are managed by Microsoft, and then there are extensions that are managed by the community. But that means all of the APIs that we have open for our own extensions are available for all of the personal extensions that anyone wants to make for themselves, like in TypeScript, which sometimes ends up being hard if you want to build a Python thing and Python is your bread and butter and you're writing in TypeScript. Well, now we have a new extension template where you are writing more in Python than you will need to in TypeScript. We have not eliminated it, but there is more Python. And there's a really cool extension that's just fun. It's called VS Code Pen. Does anyone know this one? It's so cute. So what you have, I don't have a picture of it today, but you just have a cute little visual icon on the bottom. It's a whole square, and sometimes there's backgrounds, and you just have little animals hanging around with you. And there's been contributions. People love to get their Hacktoberfest t-shirts based off of VS Code pets. And they'll just like add little fluffy animals. There's a squirrel, there's a snake, there's a bunch of them. Anyway, but that's an example, and I'll direct you to that particular project and others like it to be able to just kind of get into contributing to VS Code. So dev containers. So it is an open spec. Dev containers also exist in JetBrains and IntelliSense products as well. It is a development, pardon me, it is a development container. So that means you are sharing your dependencies, your compilers, SDKs, libraries, build tools, and other utilities between your inner loop, your small solo programming needs, and your outer loop, where it would be also your teams. But it's also keeping consistent that operation, the OS, your runtimes, and your shared library, where you are able to have it declaratively. So even if you don't decide to use the same image or share file structures between your dev container, Docker image, and your production container, you also have all of that listed explicitly. Here are some more quick links for you to learn. There are so many quick links. This is truly just me digesting all of the information from all of the places over the last few years that I've been working in VS Code, and this is what I wish I had when I first started. You don't have to fill this out now because we're running low on time, but if I, just like I mentioned to friends, I want to make relationships. Django is already my community. I really enjoy making friends here. So if there are tools that you are bringing to VS Code that we're not supporting to the level that you'd like, please let me know. We just integrated support for Hatch and Pixie development environment tools. So, and I don't use Hatch. I started using Hatch because we support it now. So please let me know. But that is not one of our golden paths. So if that's, for example, something you'd like to invest more time in, please let me know. Code Spaces. So Code Spaces is dev containers, but you're using Azure Compute. You start out free, and you can pick your RAM and I think the size of your memory, and then you can also pick the location that you'll use as you're picking. There's also default options, so you can just hit the green button on your GitHub project, and we'll spin up a container, and now you have VS Code in your browser, and it's exactly the same tool that's running vscode.dev, and you are able to program like that. You'll also still have some of that declarative structure in dev containers, where you are now, you can have a post create command, for example, so you can open up a Linux instance, and then you can have that it will create install all of your requirements, and then start your Django project, for example. And so that's really, dev containers, when I speak about it, it's mostly to open source contributors, because that's where I feel like it makes the most sense. Because if you are trying to have a project that may have high level complexities, maybe it's a Python project, but for convenience, you are an expert in React and you put React in your project, but you don't expect your end users to have any TypeScript or JavaScript experience, you're able to run certain commands on the background for them and able to just, so they can just start committing or playing with the code, for example. And so it's a really cool sandbox. Commands are also welcome. So what you have on this left side, you have your code editor, you have your desktop in your browser, JetBrains or command line. We're not trying to push you anywhere. But it will talk to your Azure instance that we've allocated for you in the cloud. We do have a limited amount that you can have per month, and it resets per month, and then there are paid plans. So you can get a lot with what they have now. And you should get in now because it's a new tool, and we like to give you like the free good layers now, and then we start taking like the things later. Yeah, there you go. Gotta get your We already talked about this. It seems like a good number of people had not heard of code spaces before this. So I'm really excited to be able to share that with you. It's really fun. You can answer it, you can not answer it. So this is the guide. This actually gets pretty tedious. And so I'm also using like a non-Microsoft approved tool. So this is why it's definitely a personal project. But this is a Canva instance. It's interactive. It's really like kind of made to be shared among teams in order to get kind of buy-in, but it's also made to be fun. So here are some extensions that I think are really, really fun and lovely. There's an extension pack called the Python extension pack. It includes Django snippets. Snippets are not as popular now because we are leaning towards the AI path, right? So if you want a little code chunk that is common and usable, the boilerplate, for example, you would not, we're encouraging you to use \I and we'll start up GitHub code spaces, excuse me, GitHub Copilot. But there is snippets if you're just like, I'm agnostic on the AI, you have the snippets and it's very, very similar to what we all use snippets for, like Django snippets, like Carlton's Django snippets website. We also have Jupyter Notebook in here. We have Data Wrangler, doc strings, other things like that. We're also supporting Rough. And Rough is actually one of the default extensions in the Python profile. I'll also go into what a profile is. Profiles solve the problem of I don't know what to do, I just started. So you go into the bottom left-hand corner of your VS Code. But you go into the bottom. You go into the bottom left-hand corner of your VS Code instance. This is actually me working on this project right now. And you'll go to the settings and you can see that I'm in my VS Code Day profile right now. I have so many profiles. I'm not good at naming, just like the rest of you all. Maybe some of you are better than me, but I have some for my presentations. So that means I'm like doing ×4x so people can see what I'm doing. I have some that are specifically colored in a particular way. Like what's the program that I was working on that's pretty recently? Yeah, we don't need to get into this too much, but this has been a really fun way to kind of color code certain things that I work on and how I enjoy it. But then there's also this way that you can edit profiles, show profile contents. You can create one. So when you want to create a profile, you can start from Python. You can also include all of these things and decide whether or not you want to include these things or not, and then you will create. I'm not going to do that right now, because I want to show you my settings in my current profile. So I'm going to go to my settings. And this is how, and I also have this in able to be copied in the same repo, but these are some of my settings. I usually use the JSON, but you can also use the interactive UI for all of these things. And this, I have it, and you can have this, but this doesn't exist necessarily. This is my opinion. So I'm also giving some of you all my opinions that I think work really well. So I have my terminal settings. I don't have particular things for Django because most of them in the settings are just Python generically. I opt into all experiments. One, because that's my job and I'm going to be testing on all of the new things that come out. They do come out daily on the Insiders program and monthly on the regular release schedule. But you also get really cool, fun experimental things, and we like ramp up the experiment level so we can see what the test case and whether or not we get like rage clicks or things like that. That is one reason why having the telemetry on is good for us, because we can tell if people are having a really bad time. But if you don't want to be watched, don't be watched, and we can turn it all the way off. And here are some of my default Python settings. You can auto import completions and things like that. Cool. Okay. That was just like off the cuff. Get out. Okay. There we go.
Excuse me, how do you open the settings? Because I only have them in my projects.
Okay, so there's two ways. There's actually several ways you can open up your settings. You can go from the top. You can go from the top and look at the menu bar. Okay, I don't have my mouse. This is great. Okay, you can go to your settings down. Nope, it's always down here. I don't usually do settings over here. Settings is in here somewhere. Settings is definitely in here. It's here. It's in one of these drop-down menus. Apologies, I don't know exactly where it is on this one. You can also do control comma or command comma if you're on a Mac. And then you can also just press this button. So then when you go here, I have mine set to default to JSON settings. But if you press this little icon right here, it'll switch between the UI settings and the JSON settings. So this is what the UI settings look like. There's also, so since we're on it, there's also the difference between user and workspace settings. I have it in the frequently asked questions. We're just going to talk like humans today. So people like to commonly ask what trumps what. So you have your user settings. If I go to my user settings and then I switch this over, you'll see that my user settings are underneath my app data. This is for my project. But then I go back and I go to my workspace settings. These settings are going to be within my project. So I don't have any specific workspace settings for this one, but these are going to be committed with your code and shared with the rest of your team. So if they're also using VS Code, it's not intrusive. I mean, you can just you can just hide them if you don't like seeing that VS Code directory, but it will automatically suggest extensions for you, and you can hit yes or no whether or not you'd like to use those extensions. And one of the cool things about that, most of the time I would not put that on people because it's intrusive, but like if you're doing things, there's a cool extension called SQL tools, and what you're able to do if for your, I've done, and you can look at columns of your entire database. There's also another cool one called Data Wrangler. It was in preview. It's now generally available. It's in GA. And that one's a really cool one because you are literally wrangling your data. It's doing a lot of the cleaning for you. It has this cool bar chart at the top, and it lets you kind of figure out where the outliers are visually. So certain things like that, when it might be integral to your team's workflow, depending on what you're doing, you may want to suggest, especially to newer team members. And if you're onboarding a lot, or if you're a consultant or you hire consultants a lot, this is helpful. And just like this is an extension pack, you can make your own extension pack. There are some famous companies that work with us, and we help them optimize their VS Code solutions, Facebook. And we have options to do things, and you have all of the same resources. We just kind of provide some of the flavor for it. Black is really not popular. It's a formatter, and we have an extension for Black, and we maintain it. There's SQL tools. This one is the one that you're going to use for CockroachDB and Postgres, and this is the one that will allow you to do all of the other ones. I think it's just the driver for it. There are also GitHub extensions, so you're able to do all of your GitHub through your editor, which is, I think, a common experience. I think they also have that in Python, where you're able to do that through your editor as well. This is Code Spaces. I'm gonna be honest, I don't use the Code Space extension, but it's available, and there are some integrations that make Code Spaces easier on your VS Code instance on your machine. I don't know why. I literally just go to GitHub and press the big green button and start my Code Space instance. There's also GitHub Actions, and there's GitHub Copilot. And actually, when I made this, there was not GitHub Copilot chat, and now there is. Getting more into this, here is the anatomy of VS Code. So here's where you're going to find some of the questions that we just asked. Some brave people raised their hand on where to click. But you'll have the activity bar, your editor. You'll have where your drop-down menus are selected, your command palette. So your command palette is Control P, and that's one of the ways you can get a really cool bar at the top, and you can just type code, type words that seem similar to what you think is going to happen, and they'll have suggestions on what you can do. So you can literally choose not to navigate to any of the buttons and not know any of the things, and you just type in new feature or Python something, and it'll give all of the suggestions that are coded tagged for Python. Activity bar, things like that. So I'll let you guys go through this. This is an infographic I made myself. So if you think it looks gross, sorry, I'm not a designer, but it was really helpful for me. So this goes through the settings sync. So if you have VS Code on any machine, it will sync amongst your machines. Shareable profiles, which is that link that I showed you. You can also, so we had that drop down menu, that up menu, and we created a new profile. From that same menu, you can share a profile. Then it will give a link, and then someone else can take that link, and it will open, and it would either open your profile on your machine or in the browser. So I'll show you that later because I have some. You could do it through the UI, and here are the files that are in your directory that we use as references on building your Python environment. These are artifacts of Python, so it'll be your pyproject.toml we'll use, or we'll look for your requirements, we'll look for your manage.py, and that will help whether how we do your settings for your debugger, for example, or your testing UX. All right, so that's that. There's some more goodies. I'm telling you, I spent a lot of time on this because I care. We talked about key bindings. That's a kind of a mission for some people. They don't like to touch their mouse. You have all the options to set up all of your key bindings, and there are also extensions that will have opinionated key bindings for you. And there are also PyCharm key binding extensions. So someone out there was like, I have all my extensions out of the box from PyCharm, and I want them to be the same in VS Code, and they made an extension for it, and now you don't have to think about it. And then you can change where you feel necessary. And then you can remember that I said it goes user profiles, user, and then workspaces on what trumps each other. There you go. Shortcut keys. And these are all the ones that I was mentioning. Are we getting close on time? We're really close on time. Okay, so let's go to... okay, actually doing pretty okay. So I'm gonna zoom through this. Here's a checklist on things that you can customize. Here's that settings.json that I mentioned, the opinionated one that I have. So I just gave you my cheat code. And then here's the link, the list of profiles. And I showed you my VS Code day one. But if I wanted to just try out this GitHub extension one, these are all related to episodes of the Python Pulse. It opens up vscode.dev in the browser. And then it shows me all of the options here, and I can look to see what's involved in each of these in these sections before I decide to accept it. Snippets and the UI state, and here are some of my extensions. And I can say I don't want Black, and I don't want dev containers, and I don't want Docker, but I do want something else, and then I'll create profile. Or I can create it in Visual Studio Code, or I can create it right here. Cool. Go into more. Oh, yeah, and that was what settings trump is what. Okay, so this is the one that I wasn't really supposed to show, but I'm going to because I like you all. And this was the 45, it actually took me in real life an hour, and then we edited it to 45 minutes, so I want to be real honest. It took me an hour to build a Django app, and I have, it's a recipe apps, and we go through the entire MTV of it all, and it does all the CRUD, and we're using class-based views for CRUD, so it makes it really easy, but I am prompting it, and you're seeing me live and going on the video, because I'm just, reading and talking, and I'm debugging, and I'm like, oh, shoot, that doesn't work, and so then I ask Copilot, why doesn't that work, and it gives me some help on it. But I've been an engineer for a while, and so this is why I was able to know where to look and how. It is not magic, and I would not let it make decisions for me without review. I also think it's important to note that there is significant energy usage with every call for every use of ChatGPT, and we should be conscious of that, and there's not a lot of conversations on it. There's Zen mode, screencast mode, and portable mode. These are also just different ways to improve your development experience. I also have a shareable guide for dev containers. And this explains some of the things I discussed before, and it has lots of good graphics. But this is all from my words, so this is explaining it. This is an example of the declarative JSON. It's hard to see, but I also have examples on it, and I also have some videos on it too, and they're linked. video. Some people may know Sarah Kaiser. She's the bee's knees. She's so great. I love working with her. We have a video on the button. Here's a really cool, and some people may know Pamela Fox. She's kind of a legend. And so we have a video, I'll make the video smaller horizontally, but there's a video on doing Postgres with dev containers and code spaces. So it goes over all of those things. And then we also get into SQL tools, where I get to show you the clicking through the rows and looking at data and things like that. IntelliSense. So this is one of the ones where, excuse me, where I do not think we have the same level of support as PyCharm does, where the Django and Python IntelliSense works. And it's just, we all excel in different ways, and I really appreciate that. It's something we're working on. So if you do have specifics on like errors that, or errors that shouldn't be errors, where you should be able to dive down the rabbit hole and have the clarity to go to definition and it won't work, opening up a GitHub issue is the best way to get in contact with us. You also know me. So sometimes I fall through the cracks, but if you want a personal, it goes through the cracks with me. But if you want a personal touch, you can always reach out to me. Linters are important. I talk about linters in Linter 101 and then how it works with VS Code in this video. We support PyLint as our primary. There's also, we do support Py, but PyLint is our primary one. And then there's also the community contributions left in MyPy. And Charlie R. Marsh and Astral Team do a fantastic job keeping web up to date. These are some activities that you can do. I have examples of debugging Django. There's also release news that happens every month in my face on a video every time. So there's things on that as well. Oh, and this is my launch.json that I use for having my custom debugging settings on VS Code. But it walks you through this. The only difference I particularly made is I do auto start browser is true, and it usually doesn't come with that out of the box. Things like that. Can someone help me with time? I don't know what time is. Excuse me? Okay. All right. We have some accessibility tools. I'm going to update that those links. Oh, exploring your database is a fun one. Okay. There should be a video that pops up here. There's also Data Wrangler is a really cool tool, and there's a video for that. And if it's not there, then I'll just add it after this meeting. And I'm going to do a team member. I haven't changed from Markdown to RST, so there are some typos. Oh, here's the Data Wrangler one. So there's a video on Data Wrangler if you want to learn a little bit more about how it works without getting in. And then Jupyter Notebooks, our Jupyter Notebook support is truly second to none. It is one of our first class extensions, and we add so much in the kitchen sink into Jupyter Notebooks. And honestly, I prefer using Jupyter Notebooks in VS Code, even if I'm not doing anything else, just Jupyter Notebooks in VS Code. Playwright is a testing framework. It's built off of PyTest, but it also is kind of apples to apples to Selenium. And if you're interested, if you're itching for a new end-to-end testing solution, check out Playwright. There's not a lot of chatter about Python and Playwright in particular, just not a lot of content, but it's pretty intuitive. And of the conversations that I've been seeing happen, everyone's really excited to move from Selenium. It's just kind of been out there for a while. But give me feedback if you like it. And I should be creating videos on that soon, but that's the promise. So there's also some features on user testing as well. So for example, you're able to create a development environment with dev containers, code spaces, and just regular VS Code, where you can open up a port and it will have, so I don't know if anyone's used ngrok before. I was paying for ngrok for a while, so I could have a little server to point to a URL and I can share it with a friend so they can review a feature visually. And VS Code has that out of the box, and now it's free, so everybody's lunch. Port forwarding, for example, that's the name of it. That's the tool. There's also live share, and then we have code spaces and dev teams. And we also have other remote options as well for engaging. So you can do SSH or other types of remote containers, and we have support for those at varying levels. And the FAQ. So that was the Zoom Store experience. And I hope that you all enjoy this little guide, because really the goal is to give you the resources, and then we can just open up discussions. I didn't want to move through a project because we all come with different levels. But we have projects on our VS Code documentation site. You can spin up a Flask instance and then play around with Flask. And then we also point out the ways that it helps you with your Flask project, for example. We have a Django one, and we also have a Fast API one. Let's stop. Yeah. 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 Yep. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very fair point. So this is where you start. This is just opening up a new VS Code instance. And if you want to, I think in general, we intend for this to be a more pared down experience. I'd love your feedback right now. Do you think this feels a little bit more digestible than when you're looking at full code and kind of clicking around? But still, you would like even less. Yeah. Yeah. You're not the only one who says that. I absolutely think that makes sense. More thoughts on that, I'm welcome to it. So one of the things is when you install different packages, extensions, we start showing you walkthroughs. And these are going to be able to get you through, it'll show you very slowly how to create a Python file, running debug, keep exploring, and also mark it as done, and then you can go on to something else. And the hard things with this is that it assumes a certain level of expertise with Python, when you may be in a different level of Python or your project. And so then now we're speaking to different groups. We need to start at 101 on VS Code, but not necessarily 101 on the Python project. So if you have ideas on better ways that we can structure this, we are so open. I'll make a video about it. I mean, truly, we're a team of like 10 people, and we really enjoy communicating with people. Another part that I mentioned, okay, so really, really great feedback. So you can do Control-Shift-X, and you can hit your extensions. And this is the marketplace, and then you'll start just like typing things in. The first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to go Python, and that'll be the Python. You're going to want to do the Python extension maintained by Microsoft. One of the things about this, you'll see a bunch of other ones. But this is actually an extension pack. So it comes with PyLance and Python debugger. And that is truly the entirety of what you need for just a basic Python experience. And we're adding more and more of that functionality into it. So just to keep it simple, that's what you have to do. If you want to debug, which is a common occurrence, they'll start running debug. But I always like to start with a configuration file. And then they go through and that's the command palette. It's always the command palette at the top. And you just kind of start poking through, and they give you like a WYSIWYG editor or a WYSIWYG option on it. So I'll do Python debugger, and then I'll my launch configuration. I'll select my launch configuration. List here. I'm doing this on the fly, so if it's not popping up like I expected it to. there's an automatic one. Oh, I'll just put this one. There you go. That's what I'm looking for. Python debugger, and then I select Django, and then I'll select it found my manage.py, and then I'll set up the configuration file, and then I'll show you the configuration file because I want to know what it made for me, and then it starts running a server for me. And I have an issue because I have a file name, my Windows settings module is always doing something stupid. So anyway, that's how you do it. So that's really starting from the very beginning. You get your debugger, you want your testing suite, and that'll also do that same WYSIWYG editor, and you want your extension, and then you're kind of like off to the races. And then all the other things are just experience, trial and error, getting into the Zen. And that's one of the reasons why I also created this checklist. You can remember the things to look at. You want to, maybe I start with visuals because I want to focus on vibes first. You could do themes and icons, but then you can go into your settings, which I gave you an example of below. You can also tweak your terminal, your snippets, linkers, formatters, and environment settings. So that's one of the reasons why I kind of help with this checklist. That's a really, really good point. I really don't want to skate over that. And so if you have more feedback on where it should be improved, you can take it back. Yeah. Oh, really? Okay, great.
I want to know about
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm about when I'm using it, what stuff
Yes. Yeah.
Right. There is stuff that I'm not.
Yeah, so I usually do profiles based on activity and then workspace based on that particular project. There's no, it's just my personal rule of thumb. I like the profiles basically if I'm doing, so it's been fun for the VS Code YouTube series I do, the Python Pulse. Every episode we have a profile of the things that we're doing. And so if you're just like, I want to share this purple layout and a few of the extensions that I think this particular friend would enjoy, send that over, right? There's a Nicholas Cage icon something one in there. So you can get the silliest things in a profile and you can send that over. But workspace would be more like if I know that I'm using SQL tools on this particular project, if I know that I'm using these snippets on this particular thing, or it's a little bit harder when you get into the actual nitty gritty. You only know what your use cases are, but there'll be more project based. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Well, good. More thoughts, questions, concerns? I think I could go deeper into dev containers if you wanted more time, or I can talk about AI.
Yeah, can I ask you about you mentioned basically from Python.
Yes. Yes.
You mentioned
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've not played with the voice. The one that I have the video for is chat. And it is the section Supercharging features. Cool. I'm gonna keep it on mute and I'm just gonna kind of scrub through it. Oh my god, this is okay, it's only at the beginning. So this is what the chat looks like, and this is me asking questions. I start out with like, why is Django cool? While it's doing things. I also go through this and create environment at the beginning, which is cool. So I start with my command palette. And this is gosh, okay. So I start with a profile, I show what my profile is doing, and accept changes. I'm scrubbing through. I talk about Django while it's creating my virtual environment for me. It installs all my version and my requirements, and this is me checking the requirements. This is me having that same issue because for some reason I always want to keep this Django settings module named to something wrong. But anyway, I'm creating a project. And this is where in from opening and closing chat, as we said, it looks like it closed it for a while. And Oh, this is okay. So this is me doing the \I, and I'm prompting it from inside my editor. But you can also just have the chat open as well. Yes, it does have context of the files, but one of the things that is helpful is it explicitly say, and I mentioned that too. I'm like, everything in my model, can you create a view? Oh yeah, oh my gosh, actually that was, I said, can you create all of these views? I need to create, delete, read, something, something, based off of my models.py. And so if you specify that, then yeah, so it'll work just so it bases it off of its very good question. It will not reference any of your PyCharm artifacts, not unless you have some type of extension that the community is maintaining and supporting and helping that integration. I don't know of one, but there probably is. There's tons of them. I also have like a visual aspect that makes it look like PyCharm too. But if you go to this VS Code guide and then you look at that very busy infographic, I'm of 2 minds on whether or not it's good. But over here are all the artifacts that we reference in creating our environments, right? So if you have a requirements.txt or a pyproject.toml, we'll also look at your get-more or your environment.yaml. And so when you're creating your environment, we'll reference some of these things, and we hopefully make it really intuitive to some of the business logic that happens in the background in order to decide what takes precedence and what to create for you. Seems a little bit like automagic, but the code is open and we communicate over GitHub all the time, GitHub issues all the time. If anything acts out of sync, just let us know. Yeah. Did that answer your question? A little bit? Yeah. So the short answer is no, we don't really support that workflow. Someone in the community might, but here are the
John specific.
oh, okay. Oh yes, the virtual environment. Okay, so yes, these as well, and then it would also be this run and debug. Yeah, yep, it'll be this run and debug, and it'll reference that manage.py, and it'll start that, and then you can also create. So I'll do my command palette. So I'm hitting Control, and I'm opening that, and I can say create environment, or I can select my interpreter. I think this is the one you're talking about. So it's Control Shift P. You select your interpreter. And then it'll give you a list of, so some of them I've gotten from the Microsoft Store, some of them I've installed my own, and they're also in different places. I don't know, chaotic like that. And then you can select them here. Cool, awesome questions. This is so good. Okay, cool. Anything else? Are we running out of time? Yeah.
Using
yeah.
Really helpful to go first.
Yeah.
But we don't normally have that.
Yeah.
Is there a
yeah.
Is there a way to see what?
Yes, there is. Short answer is yes, there is. And so it could be, so sometimes when you're writing code, and I don't have like good code to show you right now, but when you're writing code and you do F12, you click on it and you hit F12 and it'll go to definition. Sometimes it'll go within your code. There is a setting where it will also go all the way down into your packages as well, right? So you'll have an import statement. It'll go into your imported bits, right? There's also this search functionality, search and replace, so I can get out of my, and there should be, so control shift, there should be a feature where you can also include, yeah, you can include, I think if you put here, I'm not sure, so I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. but you can put in your virtual environment and it'll also include all of those site packages. You can put site packages or something like that. But it'll also be in Control Swift. Oops. So I guess I could just search and it would be like settings. I think it would be find in files. Something along this line, right? That's how I would debug that. But I don't have the exact answer. I could find it though. That's a really good one. Cool. More questions? It's been a blast chatting with you. I do include all of you all as my friends now. And if you ask really hard and good questions, you make me look good. So when I say I don't know and I get to go figure it out, it makes my job better. It makes me less happy. So ask me hard questions. All right. Thank you.